Most people think strength is loud. They think strength argues. They think strength reacts. They are wrong. Real strength is silent. The person who reacts loses control. The person who stays silent keeps it. This audiobook is not about being passive. It's about being powerful. Powerful enough to pause. Powerful enough to observe. Powerful enough to say nothing when everyone expects noise. You have a choice. React emotionally like the rest, or stay silent and take control. That's the key. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Silence is not weakness. It's authority. Silence is misunderstood. Most people think silence means hesitation. They think it means fear. They think it means you have nothing to say. That belief is wrong. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. Silence is authority under control. Emotionally weak people rush to fill space. They talk to soothe their anxiety. They explain to calm their insecurity. They react because stillness feels unbearable. Emotionally strong people do the opposite. They pause. They breathe. They let silence sit in the room. And that silence changes everything. You have a choice. Always. You can react or you can control. That's the key. When you speak too quickly, you give information away. You reveal emotion. You reveal doubt. You reveal need. Silence reveals nothing. Silence keeps leverage. Silence keeps power. That's not weakness. That's authority. Look at the calmest person in any room, in a meeting, in an argument, in a negotiation. They are rarely the loudest. They are rarely the fastest to respond. They sit back. They listen. They wait. And everyone notices, because the calmest person owns the room. This is not accidental. This is not personality. This is discipline. It's not about confidence. It's about control. You've seen it in leaders. Real leaders. Not performers. Not attention seekers. When a leader speaks less, people lean in. When they pause before answering, the room quiets. When they don't rush to justify decisions, others stop questioning them. Why? Because certainty doesn't rush. Certainty doesn't panic. Certainty doesn't explain itself. You don't need their permission to be calm. You don't need their approval to be silent. That urge you feel to speak, that's fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of losing status. Fear of losing control. And here's the truth. The moment you react emotionally, you already lost control. That's the key. Think about arguments. Most arguments escalate because both sides talk too much. They interrupt. They defend. They attack. But when one person goes quiet, truly quiet, the dynamic shifts. Silence forces the other person to confront themselves. Their tone changes. Their energy drops. They either calm down or expose themselves. You didn't say anything, yet you gained ground. That's authority. Negotiators understand this. Experienced negotiators speak less than amateurs. They ask a question and then stop. They let the silence stretch. And in that silence, the other side fills the gap. They over-explain. They concede. They reveal priorities. The calmest person owns the room, not because they dominate, but because they don't chase control. They already have it. You have a choice. Speak to release tension, or stay silent to build leverage. Most people choose relief. Emotionally strong people choose results. That's the difference. Silence is uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is withdrawal. You are breaking an addiction to reaction. Because make no mistake, emotional reaction is an addiction. Feels good in the moment. It gives instant relief. And it costs you later. Authority is delayed gratification. Authority is restraint. Authority is choosing long-term control over short-term comfort. It's not about being cold. It's not about being distant. It's not about being passive. It's about discipline. It's not about fear. It's about mastery. You don't need to fill every gap. You don't need to respond to every comment. You don't need to defend every position. That's not strength. That's insecurity pretending to be confidence. Real confidence is quiet, because it doesn't need witnesses. Think about dominant personalities. The ones people respect instinctively. They don't overreact. They don't over-explain. They don't overpromise. They speak slowly. They speak intentionally. And sometimes they don't speak at all. And when they don't speak, the room adjusts to them. Not the other way around. That's power. The calmest person owns the room. Say it again. The calmest person owns the room. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is your training ground. Next time you feel the urge to interrupt, pause. Next time you feel the need to explain, stop. Next time you feel emotionally triggered, breathe. You have a choice. You don't need their permission to be silent. You don't need validation to pause. You don't need approval to maintain control. Silence is not retreat. Silence is positioning. Every second you stay calm while others react, you rise above the chaos. Every moment you resist the urge to speak, you strengthen authority. It's not about being right. It's about being centered. That's the key. This chapter is not telling you to never speak. It's teaching you to stop speaking emotionally, to stop reacting impulsively, to stop giving away power for relief. Silence is a tool. Authority is the outcome. And once you understand that silence is strength, not weakness, you begin to see the next truth. Silence doesn't just protect your authority. It sends a message that others feel instantly. You mastered the first shift. You stopped confusing silence with fear. Now it's time to understand why silence speaks louder than words. Chapter 2. Emotional reactions expose your weak points. Every emotional reaction leaks information. Every single one. When you react, you reveal what matters to you. You reveal where it hurts. You reveal where you are vulnerable. That's not opinion. That's psychology. If someone knows what triggers you, they know how to move you. If they know how to move you, they can control you. That's the key. Most people never realize this. They think reactions are harmless. They think anger shows strength. They think defensiveness proves conviction. It doesn't. It exposes weakness. Watch closely the next time you feel triggered. Your voice changes. Your pace speeds up. Your body tightens. You are broadcasting your weak points. You have a choice. Reveal them or protect them. Emotionally strong people protect their inner territory. They don't advertise it. They don't leak it. They don't hand it out for free. Emotionally weak people do. Anger is the easiest tell. When you get angry, you show exactly where your ego lives. You show what you can't tolerate. You show where you feel threatened. And once that's known, it can be used again, and again, and again. That's why the same people always trigger you. They already mapped your reactions. If they can predict you, they can control you. Say it again. If they can predict you, they can control you. Defensiveness is no better. Defensiveness says, I need you to understand me. I need you to agree. I need validation. You don't. But the moment you defend emotionally, you signal insecurity. You tell the other person where to push harder, where to press. Anxiety does the same. When you rush to respond, when you overthink, when you can't sit with silence, you reveal fear of uncertainty, fear of losing control, fear of judgment. That fear becomes leverage. This is why silence matters. Silence hides your tells. Silence conceals your triggers. Silence keeps your inner world private. That's not being fake. That's being disciplined. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about not displaying it uncontrollably. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being unreadable. That's the key. Think about poker. The worst player is the one who reacts to every card. They smile when they're winning. They tense when they're losing. And everyone at the table sees it. Life works the same way. Your reactions are tells. Your emotions are signals. And the world is always watching. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need approval to remain neutral. You don't need validation to be silent. You have a choice. Most people choose expression. Emotionally strong people choose protection. This chapter is about control, not suppression. When someone insults you and you explode, you didn't win. You revealed. When someone questions you and you rush to explain, you didn't clarify. You exposed. When someone pressures you and you panic, you didn't respond. You surrendered. That's not strength. Strength is being calm when provoked, still when challenged, measured when pushed, because calm gives you options. Reaction removes them. That's the key. Here's the practical shift. Next time you feel a reaction rising, do nothing for 5 seconds. No words. No gestures, no explanation, just breathe. Those 5 seconds break predictability. They disrupt patterns. They deny the other person information. You are no longer easy to read. And when you're no longer easy to read, you are no longer easy to control. If they can't predict you, they lose leverage. If they lose leverage, you regain authority. This is not about manipulation. This is about self-mastery. You are not responsible for making others comfortable. You are responsible for guarding your inner stability. It's not about anger. It's about discipline. It's not about anxiety. It's about restraint. It's not about expression. It's about control. Say it again. If they can predict you, they can control you. So stop being predictable. Stop reacting on schedule. Stop responding on impulse. Stop handing out emotional access to anyone who presses the right button. Silence interrupts their strategy. Calm erases their advantage. And once you understand this, silence becomes more than restraint. It becomes a weapon. A shield, a boundary. You learned why reactions expose you. You learned why predictability is dangerous. Now it's time to understand the next level. Silence doesn't just protect you. It sends a message immediately. You closed the door to manipulation. Now let's talk about what silence communicates to everyone around you. Chapter 3. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. Silence does something most people never understand. Creates pressure. And pressure reveals truth. When you don't react, the other person feels exposed. They feel the weight of the moment. They feel the need to fill the space. And when people fill silence, they reveal themselves. That's the key. Most people think power comes from talking, from persuading, from dominating the conversation. It doesn't. Power comes from control, and silence is control made visible. You have a choice: react and give relief, or stay silent and apply pressure. Emotionally weak people talk to escape discomfort. Emotionally strong people let discomfort do the work. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. Say it again. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. Watch what happens when you stop reacting. In an argument, the other person keeps talking. They repeat themselves. They escalate. They contradict themselves. They start saying things they didn't plan to say. Because silence makes people uncomfortable. And discomfort makes people honest. This is why silence is feared. It removes control from the speaker. It shifts it to the observer. When you stay silent, you're not passive. You're watching. You're gathering information. You're letting the other person show their hand. That's authority. Think about conflict. When someone is angry and you respond with silence, their anger has nowhere to land. They expected resistance. They expected reaction. They expected fuel. They got nothing, so they talk more. They explain themselves. They justify their behavior. They reveal motivations. And now you see clearly. You didn't argue. You didn't defend. You didn't attack. You observed. That's the key. In negotiations, silence is lethal. Experienced negotiators know this. They make an offer and stop talking. They don't sell it. They don't explain it. They don't soften it. They wait. And in that waiting, the other side starts talking. They reveal limits. They reveal urgency. They reveal fear. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. Amateurs talk to fill space. Professionals let space work for them. You don't need their permission to stay quiet. You don't need approval to observe. You don't need validation to let silence stand. You have a choice. Most people choose comfort. Emotionally strong people choose clarity. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If silence makes you anxious, it's because you rely on words for control. That's not strength. That's dependence. Silence forces you to sit with uncertainty, to tolerate tension, to trust yourself. And when you can do that, others feel it. They feel your steadiness. They feel your composure. They feel that you're not moved easily. And that changes how they behave around you. People reveal themselves fastest when they feel watched but not challenged. That's why interrogators stay quiet. That's why therapists pause. That's why leaders don't rush to respond. They understand something most people don't. Silence is an invitation for others to speak, to explain, to expose. You're not forcing truth out of them. You're letting it come out naturally. That's discipline. It's not about manipulation. It's about restraint. It's not about dominance. It's about patience. It's not about ego. It's about intelligence. Say it again. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. Here's how you apply this. Next time someone challenges you, don't answer immediately. Pause. Look at them. Stay calm. Let the silence stretch just a little longer than feels comfortable. That pause does more than any argument ever could. It makes the other person self-conscious. It makes them question their words. It makes them reveal intent. If they're insecure, they'll overtalk. If they're dishonest, they'll stumble. If they're aggressive, they'll escalate and expose it. And now you know exactly who you're dealing with. That's power. Most people ruin this moment by reacting too soon. They interrupt the process. They relieve the pressure. Don't. You have a choice. Hold the line. Hold the silence. Hold the advantage. This is especially important in emotional situations. When someone accuses you, when someone tries to provoke you, when someone wants a reaction, they are fishing. Silence denies them the catch. And when they don't get what they want, they show what they are. Pressure reveals truth. You don't need to confront everyone. You don't need to expose everyone. People expose themselves if you let them. That's the discipline. This chapter is about trust. Not trust in others. Trust in yourself. Trust that you don't need to rush. Trust that you don't need to explain. Trust that silence will do its job. Because silence always does. You're learning now that silence is not empty. It's active. It's intentional. It's strategic. And once you master this, something changes. People start treating you differently. They become more careful with their words. More respectful of your space. Not because you demanded it, but because silence commanded it. You've learned how silence exposes others. You've learned how pressure works in your favor. Now it's time to understand the next layer. Silence doesn't just reveal others. Protects you. You stopped reacting. You started observing. Now let's talk about what silence does for your energy, your focus, and your long-term strength. Chapter 4. Stop explaining yourself to feel safe. Over-explaining feels responsible, feels polite, feels mature. It isn't. Over-explaining is fear in disguise. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged. Fear of losing approval. That's the trap. You think explaining makes things smoother. You think it prevents conflict. You think it keeps you safe. It doesn't. It teaches people that your decisions are negotiable. That's the key. Every extra sentence after your decision weakens it. Every justification invites debate. Every explanation hands control to the listener. Confident people don't do that. They state their decision once, clearly, calmly, and then they stop. You have a choice. Explain to feel safe, or stand still and let discomfort pass. Emotionally weak people talk to escape tension. Emotionally strong people tolerate it. It's not about being rude. It's not about being cold. It's about standards. You don't need their approval. You need your standards. Say it again. You don't need their approval. You need your standards. Over-explaining is a signal. It says, please agree with me. Please understand. Please validate this. You don't need that. The moment you start defending a boundary, you downgrade it. You turn it from a rule into a request. That's not authority. That's insecurity trying to survive. Watch how people respond when you explain too much. They interrupt. They question. They push. Because you invited them in. Silence would have closed the door. Confident people understand something simple. Decisions don't need applause. They need consistency. When you explain yourself repeatedly, you teach others that persistence works. That if they push hard enough, you'll cave. And then they push harder. That's the cost. You have a choice. State your boundary once. Or negotiate it forever. That's the key. Think about leaders. Real leaders. They don't say, well, I was thinking maybe this is best because. They say, This is the decision. And they stop. The room adjusts to them. Not because they're aggressive, but because they're certain. Certainty doesn't explain itself. Over-explaining is not clarity. It's anxiety. It's not communication. It's self-soothing. And it drains your energy. Every explanation costs you emotional fuel. Every justification pulls you into someone else's frame. Silence keeps you centered. You don't need their permission to decide. You don't need validation to hold your ground. You don't need approval to be firm. It's not about kindness. It's about discipline. It's not about being nice. It's about being clear. Say it again. You don't need their approval. You need your standards. Here's the practical shift. The next time you make a decision, state it in one sentence. Not two. Not five. One. Then stop talking. If they ask why, pause. Answer briefly or not at all. Not everything deserves an explanation. If someone presses you emotionally, that's information. They're uncomfortable with your boundary. That discomfort is theirs to manage, not yours. That's the key. Over-explaining keeps you small, keeps you reactive, keeps you tied to other people's emotions. Silence cuts the cord. You're not here to convince everyone. You're here to live by your values. Strong people don't explain their standards. They enforce them consistently. Weak people explain their boundaries until they disappear. Which one are you choosing? You have a choice. This chapter is about self-trust, about believing your decisions are enough, about letting silence do the stabilizing work. When you stop explaining, something powerful happens. People stop pushing. They stop negotiating. They stop assuming they can change you, because your calm firmness speaks louder than words. You're learning now that silence protects authority, that it shields your decisions, that it strengthens your presence. And there's one more layer to this. When you stop explaining, you stop leaking energy. You reclaim focus. You reclaim peace. You reclaim control. You've learned to stop defending yourself. Now it's time to learn why silence sharpens your mind under pressure. Chapter 5. Silence breaks emotional manipulation. Manipulation feeds on reaction, needs it, survives on it. Take away the reaction and manipulation collapses. That's the key. Every manipulative tactic, guilt, pressure, provocation, urgency has one goal: to move you emotionally, to make you respond before you think. Silence shuts that down. No reaction, no leverage. Say it again. No reaction, no leverage. Manipulators don't want conversation. They want control. They want access to your emotions. Anger gives them fuel. Defensiveness gives them openings. Anxiety gives them speed. Silence gives them nothing. You have a choice. Feed the manipulation or starve it. Most people don't see manipulation because it doesn't look aggressive. It looks concerned. It looks urgent. It looks disappointed. I'm just saying this because I care. If you really valued me, you would. Why are you making this so difficult? Those are hooks. And reactions are the bait. The moment you explain, you're caught. The moment you defend, you're pulled in. The moment you get emotional, you've handed them leverage. That's not strength. That's predictability. Silence breaks the pattern. Manipulators rely on scripts. They expect certain responses. They count on your discomfort. When you stay silent, the script fails. They repeat themselves. They escalate. They reveal intention. Pressure increases. Truth surfaces. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. That's the key. Think about guilt tactics. Guilt only works if you accept responsibility for someone else's feelings. Silence refuses that contract. You don't argue. You don't justify. You don't absorb. You let the guilt hang in the air. And without reaction, it dies. No reaction. No leverage. Provocation works the same way. Someone insults you, challenges you, pushes your buttons. They want an explosion. They want defense. They want emotion. Silence denies the payoff. And when there's no payoff, the behavior stops or escalates into exposure. Either way, you win. This is not about being passive. It's about being unreachable. It's not about ignoring reality. It's about refusing manipulation. It's not about weakness. It's about discipline. Say it clearly. It's not about emotion. It's about control. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need approval to remain silent. You don't need validation to protect your boundaries. You have a choice. Here's what emotional manipulators hate most. Uncertainty. When you don't react, they don't know where they stand. They don't know if their tactic worked. They don't know what to do next. That uncertainty destabilizes them. Silence turns the tables. Instead of you being managed, they become unsettled. That's power. Look at real-world examples. In relationships, manipulation thrives on emotional immediacy. The demand for answers, the pressure for reassurance, the urgency to resolve tension. Silence slows everything down, and slowing down breaks control. In workplaces, manipulation often hides behind urgency. We need an answer now. This is a big deal. Everyone's waiting. Silence buys clarity. You pause. You think. You decide. You don't rush because someone else wants control. No reaction. No leverage. Say it again. Here's the practical discipline. The next time you feel pressure, do less. Not more. Shorten your responses. Lower your tone. Increase your pauses. Let silence stretch. You are not required to respond on someone else's timeline. That's the key. Manipulation accelerates. Authority decelerates. Silence creates space. Space restores choice. And choice is freedom. You have a choice. This chapter is not about shutting people out. It's about shutting tactics down. Healthy communication survives silence. Manipulation does not. If silence ruins a conversation, it wasn't a conversation. It was control. Remember that. It's not about being harsh. It's about being grounded. It's not about confrontation. It's about composure. It's not about winning. It's about not losing yourself. Say it again. No reaction. No leverage. When you stop reacting, something shifts internally. You feel steadier, clearer, less drained. Because manipulation is exhausting. Silence is economical. Conserves your energy. Protects your focus. Keeps you in command. You don't need to explain why you're calm. You don't need to justify restraint. You don't need to announce boundaries. Silence enforces them. That's the discipline. You've learned how silence breaks manipulation, how it starves guilt, how it shuts down provocation. Now it's time to go deeper, because silence doesn't just defend you. It reshapes how others see you. You stopped being reactive. You stopped being predictable. Now let's talk about how silence builds quiet confidence that commands respect. Chapter 6. The pause is where power lives. Power does not live in speed. It lives in the pause. 1 second of silence can save years of regret. 1 breath can stop a chain reaction. 1 pause can restore control. That's the key. Most damage in life happens in moments of speed. Fast words, fast emotions, fast decisions. Regret is not created slowly. It's created instantly, and the pause interrupts that. You have a choice. React automatically, or pause deliberately. Emotionally weak people move fast to escape discomfort. Emotionally strong people slow down to maintain control. It's not about hesitation. It's about command. Pause first. Decide second. Speak last. Say it again. Pause first. Decide second. Speak last. The pause is not empty time. It's decision space. In that space, you regain access to logic, to clarity, to choice. Without it, you are operating on impulse. And impulse is expensive. Every argument you regret started without a pause. Every message you wish you hadn't sent skipped the pause. Every relationship mistake ignored the pause. That's not coincidence. The pause is the gatekeeper. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need approval to breathe. You don't need validation to slow down. You have a choice. Most people feel the urge to respond immediately, to fill the silence, to prove engagement. That urge is fear. Fear of awkwardness. Fear of losing control. Fear of being judged. The pause trains you to sit with that fear and not obey it. That's discipline. It's not about confidence. It's about restraint. It's not about intelligence. It's about control. Here's the truth. The fastest responder is rarely the strongest. The calmest responder is. That's the key. Let's make this practical. First drill, breath control. When emotion rises, slow your breathing. Inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 2. Exhale slowly for 6. This resets your nervous system, pulls you out of reaction. It restores access to choice. No one needs to know you're doing it. That's the power. Second drill, delayed response. Not everything requires an immediate answer. Emails, messages, questions. If you feel emotional urgency, wait. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. Most emotional reactions expire with time. That's the key. Third drill, internal labeling. When triggered, name it silently. Anger, fear, defensiveness. Labeling creates distance. Distance restores control. You are not the emotion. You are observing it. Pause first. Decide second. Speak last. Say it again. This is not theory. This is survival. High-pressure professionals know this. Pilots, surgeons, crisis negotiators. They are trained to pause under stress. Because speed kills. Calm saves. You don't rise to the level of your emotion. You fall to the level of your training. So train the pause. You have a choice. Without the pause, silence becomes suppression. With the pause, silence becomes strategy. That's the difference. The pause gives you time to ask one question. What response gives me control? Not relief. Not validation. Control. That question changes everything. Sometimes the answer is to speak. Briefly. Calmly. Sometimes the answer is silence. Always the answer comes after the pause. You don't need their permission to take time. You don't need approval to think. You don't need validation to choose restraint. That's authority. Most people mistake speed for confidence. They think quick answers show competence. They don't. They show anxiety. Real confidence is comfortable with silence, comfortable with waiting, comfortable with not knowing immediately. The pause makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability removes leverage from others. If they can't rush you, they can't control you. That's the key. The pause also protects your future self, the version of you who will live with the consequences. That future self thanks you for waiting. Every time. This chapter is about building a reflex, not to speak, but to stop, to interrupt emotional momentum, because momentum is powerful and dangerous. The pause is your break. You are training now, every day, every interaction. Pause first, decide second, speak last. Say it until it becomes automatic. You've learned how silence breaks manipulation. You've learned how silence creates pressure. Now you've learned where silence is born. In the pause. And there's one more step. Silence doesn't just protect you in moments. It reshapes your identity over time. You are becoming someone who is not easily moved, not easily provoked, not easily rushed. That identity commands respect without asking for it. You mastered the pause. Now let's talk about how silence becomes your permanent state of strength. Chapter 7. Strong people don't argue. They observe. Arguments feel powerful. They feel active. They feel like you're standing your ground. They're not. Arguments are emotional traps. They pull you down to the level of reaction. They lock you into defending positions instead of seeing reality. They drain energy and give nothing back. That's the key. Strong people don't argue. They observe. Emotion reacts. Strength watches. Say it again. Emotion reacts. Strength watches. When you argue, you stop seeing clearly. You stop listening. You stop learning. Your goal becomes winning, not understanding, not control. And the moment winning becomes the goal, you've already lost authority. You have a choice. Engage emotionally, or stay above the noise. Emotionally weak people argue to feel right. Emotionally strong people observe to stay in control. It's not about being passive. It's about being strategic. Arguments create heat. Observation creates clarity. That's the difference. Watch what happens in arguments. Voices rise. Phrases repeat. Logic disappears. No one is learning. Everyone is defending. That's not communication. That's ego colliding with ego. Strong people recognize this early. They see the trap, and they step out of it. Silence is how they exit, not because they have nothing to say, but because they see no value in saying it. That's authority. You don't need their permission to disengage. You don't need approval to stay calm. You don't need validation to observe. You have a choice. Observation gives you leverage. While others talk, you gather data. While others react, you see patterns. You notice tone. You notice timing. You notice intent. And intent matters more than words. Emotion reacts. Strength watches. Say it again. Think about real-world decisions. Business. Relationships. Leadership. The worst decisions are made mid-argument, under pressure, fueled by emotion. The best decisions are made after observation, after silence, after clarity returns. That's the key. Strong people let others talk themselves into corners. They let emotion run its course. They wait until the noise settles. Then they decide. And when they speak, it lands. Because it's grounded, measured, final. That's why their words carry weight. They didn't waste them arguing. Most people argue because they want to be understood. Strong people observe because they want to understand. There's a difference. Understanding gives you options. Arguing removes them. When you observe, you learn where someone stands, what motivates them, what they're protecting. You see their fears, their insecurities, their priorities. Arguments hide this. Observation reveals it. That's power. You have a choice. React and escalate, or observe and elevate. Emotionally weak people confuse silence with surrender. Emotionally strong people know silence is positioning. Puts you above the exchange, above the chaos, above the need to prove. That's the discipline. It's not about winning debates. It's about winning outcomes. Arguments are about ego. Observation is about results. Say it again. Emotion reacts. Strength watches. Here's the practical shift. Next time a conversation turns heated, stop adding fuel. Shorten your responses. Lower your voice. Increase your pauses. You are stepping out of the emotional frame. If the other person keeps pushing, let them. They are revealing themselves. You are learning. If they accuse you of not engaging, that's information. They want reaction, not resolution. Silence denies them that. You don't owe anyone an argument. That's the key. Strong people choose their battles carefully. Most arguments aren't battles worth fighting. They are distractions. Distractions from focus, from progress, from control. Observation keeps you aligned with your goals. You don't need their permission to stay focused. You don't need approval to walk away mentally. You don't need validation to disengage. You have a choice. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you don't speak emotionally. When you do speak, it's intentional. It's calm. It's precise. And because you didn't argue, people listen. They sense your stability. They feel your composure. They recognize your strength. Not because you dominated the conversation, but because you were never dominated by it. That's authority. Observation also protects you internally. Arguments pull you into emotional storms. Observation keeps you grounded. You conserve energy. You preserve clarity. You protect your peace. It's not about being distant. It's about being disciplined. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's about mastering it. Say it again. Emotion reacts. Strength watches. This chapter is about rising above emotional bait. About refusing to be dragged into unnecessary conflict. About choosing perspective over pride. When you stop arguing, something shifts. People either calm down, or they escalate and expose themselves. Either way, you gain information, and information is power. You've learned that silence creates pressure, that pause restores control, that observation keeps you above the chaos. Now it's time for the next step, because silence doesn't just protect you in the moment. It shapes how people treat you long-term. You've stopped reacting. You've started watching. Now let's talk about how silence becomes the foundation of unshakable confidence. Chapter 8. Calm silence intimidates more than anger. Anger feels powerful, feels dominant, feels like control. It isn't. Anger is loud, and loud is easy to read. Calm silence is different. It's unreadable, and unreadable is intimidating. That's the key. When you get angry, people know exactly where you stand. They know what you want. They know what you fear. Anger gives clarity. Calm silence gives uncertainty. And uncertainty is far more powerful. You have a choice. Explode emotionally, or stay calm and let others adjust. Emotionally weak people rely on anger to feel strong. Emotionally strong people rely on composure. It's not about aggression. It's about stability. When others panic, you rise. Say it again. When others panic, you rise. Think about crisis situations. Real ones. High stakes. High pressure. The person who commands the room is never the loudest. It's the one who slows down. The one who speaks less. The one who stays calm while everyone else loses control. Calm silence doesn't just soothe chaos. It dominates it, because panic looks for direction, and calm looks like direction. That's why calm is intimidating. Anger tells people you're affected. Calm silence tells them you're not. And when you're not affected, you're not controllable. That's the key. In leadership, anger creates compliance through fear. But it also creates resistance, resentment, defiance. Calm silence creates respect. Not forced respect. Earned respect. Because people trust what is stable. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need approval to slow down. You don't need validation to remain composed. You have a choice. Anger is reactive. Calm is deliberate. Anger hands over power to the situation. Calm takes power from it. When you raise your voice, people prepare to fight or flee. When you lower your voice or say nothing, they become unsure. And unsure people watch carefully. They think twice. They reassess. That hesitation is power. Calm silence intimidates because it breaks expectations. Most people expect anger. They expect defense. They expect noise. When they don't get it, they lose their footing. That's authority. Look at strong leaders under fire. They don't rush to respond. They don't lash out. They pause. They let the moment settle. And that pause sends a message louder than words. I am not threatened. That's the message. When others panic, you rise. Say it again. Anger is predictable. Calm is not. Predictability makes you manageable. Unpredictability makes you formidable. That's the key. This doesn't mean you suppress emotion. It means you don't let emotion drive behavior. It's not about being cold. It's about being centered. It's not about dominance. It's about presence. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People are more intimidated by someone who can control themselves than by someone who tries to control others. Self-control signals depth. Restraint signals confidence. Silence signals certainty. Anger signals insecurity. That's why calm silence carries weight. You have a choice. React emotionally and feel strong for 10 seconds. Or stay calm and be strong long-term. Strength is not volume. It's stability. Say it again. When others panic, you rise. Let's make this practical. The next time tension rises, do less. Lower your tone. Slow your movements. Say fewer words. Watch what happens. Others will mirror you, or they'll become unsettled. Either way, you lead. Calm silence sets the emotional temperature. If you stay calm, the room cools. If you erupt, the room burns. That's the discipline. It's not about being passive. It's about setting the frame. You don't argue with chaos. You outlast it. Calm silence also protects your credibility. Anger can be dismissed as emotion. Calm cannot. When you finally speak after silence, your words land harder. Because you didn't waste them. People listen when you speak rarely. They ignore those who speak emotionally. That's the cost of anger. You don't need their permission to be calm. You don't need approval to hold silence. You don't need validation to command presence. You have a choice. This chapter is about reframing intimidation. True intimidation is not fear-based. It's stability-based. People don't fear calm silence. They respect it. And respect lasts longer than fear. When you stay calm under pressure, you signal mastery. Mastery of self. Mastery of situation. That's the highest form of strength. Say it again. When others panic, you rise. You're learning now that silence is not emptiness. It's force. A quiet force. Controlled force. A disciplined force. And when you carry that force consistently, people adjust around you. They become more careful, more respectful, more attentive. Not because you demanded it, but because calm commanded it. You've learned how silence breaks manipulation, how the pause restores control, how observation keeps you above arguments. Now you're seeing how silence changes how others feel around you. And there's one final shift. Silence is not just something you use. It's something you become. You mastered calm under pressure. Now let's talk about making silence your identity. Chapter 9. Silence is emotional discipline, not suppression. Silence is misunderstood. Again, people think silence means bottling things up. They think it means denial. They think it means pretending not to feel. That's wrong. Silence is not suppression. Silence is discipline. That's the key. Suppression is unconscious. Discipline is chosen. Suppression hides emotion until it explodes. Discipline feels emotion fully and still chooses control. You have a choice. Act on every feeling, or master it. Emotionally weak people confuse expression with honesty. Emotionally strong people understand restraint. It's not about numbness. It's about discipline. Say it again. It's not about numbness. It's about discipline. Silence does not mean you don't feel anger. It means anger doesn't drive you. Silence does not mean you don't feel fear. It means fear doesn't decide for you. Silence does not mean you don't feel hurt. It means hurt doesn't control your behavior. That distinction matters. Most people are ruled by their emotions because they've never learned how to feel without reacting. They feel anger and lash out. They feel anxiety and rush. They feel sadness and collapse. That's not authenticity. That's lack of training. Emotional discipline is the ability to feel deeply and act deliberately. That's strength. You don't need their permission to feel. You don't need approval to pause. You don't need validation to choose restraint. You have a choice. Discipline starts with awareness. Before you act, you feel. Before you speak, you notice. Before you respond, you observe. Emotion rises. You acknowledge it. I feel anger. I feel fear. I feel pressure. Then you stop. You don't judge it. You don't fight it. You don't obey it. You let it pass. That's discipline. It's not about killing emotion. It's about containing it. A river with banks is powerful. A flood is destructive. Silence is the bank. That's the key. Suppressed emotion leaks out sideways. Passive aggression, resentment, explosions at the wrong time. Disciplined emotion stays contained until it's useful. And sometimes it never needs to be expressed at all. That's maturity. Most people think emotional control means being fake. It doesn't. It means being selective. Not every emotion deserves action. Not every feeling deserves a voice. Strong people don't react to everything they feel. They choose. You have a choice. Here's the practice. When emotion hits, ask one question. Does acting on this give me control? If the answer is no, you stay silent. That's the rule. Anger might feel justified. Fear might feel urgent. Hurt might feel real. That doesn't mean acting is wise. It's not about being right. It's about being effective. That's the key. Silence gives emotion time to mature. Immature emotion demands immediate release. Mature emotion waits. And when emotion waits, it often dissolves. You've seen this. How many things felt overwhelming in the moment and insignificant later? Silence buys perspective. Perspective restores control. It's not about numbness. It's about discipline. Say it again. This chapter is important because many people sabotage themselves by thinking emotional strength means feeling less. It doesn't. It means handling more pressure, more discomfort, more intensity, without breaking. That's emotional strength. Silence is not avoidance. Avoidance runs from emotion. Silence stands still with it. You sit with discomfort. You allow the feeling. You don't flinch. That trains resilience. That's the discipline. You don't need their permission to feel quietly. You don't need approval to process internally. You don't need validation to stay composed. You have a choice. This is especially important in moments of injustice. When you feel wronged. When you feel disrespected. Silence doesn't mean acceptance. It means timing. You choose when and if you respond. You don't react on impulse. You respond with intention. That's power. Strong people are not emotionally cold. They are emotionally governed. They don't deny emotion. They direct it. Anger becomes clarity. Fear becomes caution. Pain becomes wisdom. But only if you don't act too soon. That's the key. Here's another rule. Feel everything. Do little. That one line will change your life. Feel fully. Act selectively. Silence is the space between feeling and action. And in that space, discipline is built. You've learned how silence breaks manipulation. How pause restores control. How calm intimidates more than anger. Now you understand the foundation beneath all of it. Silence is emotional discipline. Not suppression. Not numbness. Not denial. Discipline. And discipline compounds. The more you practice it, the less reactive you become. The less reactive you become, the more stable you feel. The more stable you feel, the more respect you command. Without asking, you mastered how to feel without reacting. You learned to control yourself internally. Now there is one final step. Because silence is not just a skill. It's a way of life. A default state. A standard. You've built the discipline. Now let's lock it in. Chapter 10. Become untouchable by saying less. Being untouchable does not mean being distant. It does not mean being cold. It does not mean avoiding life. It means being unreachable by emotional chaos. That's the key. When you stop reacting, you stop being controlled. When you stop explaining, you stop negotiating your worth. When you stop filling silence, you stop leaking power. And something shifts. You become steady. You become grounded. You become untouchable. You have a choice. Live reactively, or live deliberately. Most people are touchable because they are predictable. They react the same way every time. They get angry at the same triggers. They explain the same boundaries. They panic under the same pressure. Predictability makes you manageable. Silence removes that. Silence breaks patterns. Silence disrupts expectations. Silence ends control. That's the key. When you say less, people have less to grab onto, less to twist, less to use against you. They can't hook into your emotions. They can't bait you into arguments. They can't rush you into decisions. Because there's nothing exposed. Unshakable inside. Untouchable outside. Say it again. Unshakable inside. Untouchable outside. This is not a tactic you turn on and off. This is a standard. Silence becomes your default. Not because you're afraid to speak, but because you no longer need to. Needing to speak constantly is insecurity. Needing to react is weakness. Needing to explain is fear. Strong people don't need to prove presence. Their presence is felt. You don't need their permission to be still. You don't need approval to stay quiet. You don't need validation to hold your ground. You have a choice. Saying less forces you inward. You start listening more, thinking more, choosing more carefully. That internal stability becomes obvious to others. They sense it. They adjust to it. They respect it. Not because you demanded respect, but because you no longer chase it. That's authority. People try to test you at first. They poke. They provoke. They wait for the old reaction. But it doesn't come. And when it doesn't come, they lose interest. Or they lose leverage. Or they reveal themselves. Either way, you win. That's the key. Being untouchable doesn't mean nothing affects you. It means nothing controls you. You still feel emotion. You still experience pressure. You still face conflict. But none of it owns you. You observe first. You pause. You decide. And only then, if necessary, you speak. Unshakable inside. Untouchable outside. Say it again. This chapter is about integration. Everything you've learned comes together here. Silence as authority. Silence as protection. Silence as discipline. Now it becomes identity. You stop asking, "Should I respond?" and start asking, "Does this deserve access?" Most things don't. You stop explaining your decisions. You start enforcing them quietly. You stop arguing your value. You live it. You stop reacting to disrespect. You disengage from it. That's the shift. When silence becomes your baseline, chaos has nowhere to attach. Drama slides off. Manipulation starves. Pressure dissolves. Because there's nothing to grab. You don't need to announce boundaries. You embody them. You don't need to defend yourself. Your consistency does it for you. You don't need to control others. You control yourself. That's the highest form of power. Say it clearly. It's not about silence. It's about self-mastery. Silence is the byproduct. You have a choice. Speak to relieve tension, or stay silent to build strength. React to feel momentarily right. or pause to remain in control, explain to be understood, or stand firm and be respected. That's the choice you make every day. Being untouchable is built one moment at a time. One pause, one withheld reaction, one calm decision. It compounds. And over time, people stop testing you. They stop pushing. They stop assuming access. Not because you became aggressive, but because you became solid, unshakable inside, untouchable outside. Say it again. This is the end of the book, but it's the beginning of the standard. From now on, silence is not something you use. It's something you live. You don't rush. You don't react. You don't explain unnecessarily. You observe. You decide. You act with intention. That's emotional strength. That's inner authority. That's why emotionally strong people stay silent. Not because they are weak, but because they are in control. And now you are too. You have a choice. Now you know the truth. Strength is not loud. Power is not emotional. Control is not reaction. Every time you react, you give something away. Every time you stay silent, you take it back. You have a choice. Explode and be predictable, or stay silent and be unmovable. You don't need their permission. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove anything. Pause. Observe. Choose silence. That's the key. Starting today, say less. Feel more. Control everything.